Jesus gives us a wealth of information about the last days. In particular, there are two descriptions that are almost identical, but are of two different time periods that contain the main points, which are the world, but not those of us who are among his church and who are watching for him, will be completely blindsided by the rapture, and then tribulation will come. But contained in these descriptions are two different time periods which gives us a huge amount of detail of what the world will be like throughout this time period. Whereas other times, Jesus tells us about the judgments that are coming in the events of tribulation, these two descriptions stand out, at least to me, because Jesus is telling us about what the condition of the world will be like. And as I'm sure you're probably already aware, these two time periods are the days of Noah and the days of Lot. The days of Noah is typically talked about more than the days of Lot, and in my opinion, it's because of a couple of reasons. One, in looking in the days of Noah, Jesus gives a very detailed picture of the rapture in his description of it. Also, the picture here that is given to us of what is coming in the last days is also a very fascinating and detailed look into the genetic manipulation that is coming in the form of the mark, along with insight as to what is to coming with the strong delusion and how fallen angels will once again mingle with men, along with unchecked evil that will arise from this. Like I said, looking at the antediluvian world and what once again is coming is fascinating. And we have a series on that, episodes 12 through 14, which I've mentioned many times because of, in my opinion, how interesting it is that the reality is far more interesting than any sci-fi. But I also think that there is one last reason that the days of Lot are not talked about as much, and that is because the days of Lot are hitting a little too close for home right now. The LGBTQ, or whatever the alphabet acronym is now, is a rabid militant group that has every form of society actively seeking to take out any and all scalps that they can to worship at the form of this false religion out of fear of it. And in an age where the Laodicea church is predominant, only small groups who remain loyal to Jesus will speak up. This leads to things like looking at the days of Lot neglected. Now, for the sake of clarity, I'm going to refer to this as what it is, which is homosexuality. All of the different letters in the acronym are nothing more than different forms of degenerate fruit from the same tree. In fact, our Creator puts it this way: if a man lies with a male as he lies with a woman, both of them have committed an abomination. They shall surely be put to death. Their blood shall be upon them. In this day and age right now, homosexuality is the world's sacred religion that is the litmus test as to whether or not you will even be considered a human being. For many of us, we remember when it didn't used to be this way. There was a time when society saw this as the abomination that it is. This is a recent thing, and even if you're not old enough to remember what it was like before, I'm sure even you have seen it progress to the point from when it was enough to just routinely support and pay public homage to it, to now. You not only have to do that, but if you really want to be included in the world, you have to take part in it as well as championing it. If you're a little older, you can still get away with paying public homage to it and still be okay. But the younger you are, the expectation is that you actually do it as well. Keep this in mind as we look at the days of Lot, because if you don't believe the rapture and tribulation is about to happen, and if you don't believe the Bible is 100% telling you the truth about what is happening and about to happen, this may change your mind. The Bible tells us in Luke 17, "And as it was in the days of Noah, so will it be also in the days of the Son of Man. They ate, they drank, they married wives, they were given in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them all. Likewise, as it was also in the days of Lot, they ate, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted, they built." Now, just like in the days of Noah, we are told how unprepared a lost world is for the rapture and tribulation. But here we're told something different, more of a also. In fact, the Bible tells us likewise, as it was also in the days of Lot. Just as the days of Noah give us a huge amount of insight into the world during the last days, here a different insight is given to us, and it is a look at the depravity of man in the last days. So this piece of human history that Jesus gives us doesn't just start at Sodom and Gomorrah. It starts with Abraham and Lot. Lot was Abraham's nephew, and they loved each other. That point is made clear in other incidents recorded in Genesis, but that's a little out of the scope for here. The reason I'm pointing this out is because the group that Lot was over started quarreling with the other groups, which Abraham was over all of them. The reason this was happening is because that the groups had gotten so large that they started having disputes over resources. This had gotten to the point that Abraham and Lot agreed that for the well-being of all, they would need to split up. Abraham, out of love for Lot, told him, "You pick a direction that you would like to go, and I will go in the opposite direction." At this point, Lot made a poor decision and decided to go to Sodom. So Lot gathered up his men along with their families and possessions and headed towards Sodom, and likewise Abraham and his group headed in the opposite direction. After some time had passed, God in the flesh, Jesus, visited Abraham and told him that he was going to destroy Sodom because it was such an abomination. And then we are given details into a very interesting conversation between Abraham and Jesus. You see, Abraham was concerned about Lot and his family and those who were with him. Abraham loved Lot and didn't want them to be killed, so he negotiated with Jesus, which Jesus obviously knew he would, and Jesus allowed him to. But Abraham negotiated with Jesus to the point that Jesus agreed that if there were just 10 righteous people there, he wouldn't destroy the city. Now, this conversation in its specificity is told to us for a reason. And I've heard trusted pastors point to this as an example of the closeness of God has with those who belong to Him, and it's also a picture of God's mercy and love. While I do agree with that, I think there's also another bigger reason that I've not heard before. It's just my own thoughts, and I'm going to share that with you right after we look at what the Bible tells us what happens next. So put a mental pin in that because we're going to circle back to it in just a moment. So after this conversation, Jesus left and dispatched angels to Sodom. And here is where we see the days of Lot. Now the 2 angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. And he said, "Hear now, my lords, please turn into your servant's house and spend the night, and wash your feet. Then you may rise early and go on your way." And they said, "No, but we will spend the night in the open square." But he insisted strongly. So they turned into him and entered his house. Then he made them a feast, and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. Now before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both old and young, all the people from every quarter surrounded the house. And they called to Lot and said to him, "Where are the men that came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we may know them carnally." So Lot went out to them through the doorway and shut the door behind them, and said, "Please, brethren, do not do so wickedly. See now, I have 2 daughters who have not known a man. Please let me bring them out to you, and you may know them as you wish. Only do nothing to these men, since this is the reason they have come under the shadow of my roof." And they said, "Stand back. This one came in to stay here, and he keeps acting as a judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with them." So they pressed hard against the man Lot, and came near to break the door. But the men reached out their hands and pulled Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And they struck the men who were at the doorway of the house with blindness, both small and great, so they became weary of trying to find the door. Then the men said to Lot, "Have you anyone else here? Son-in-law, your sons, your daughters, and whomever are in the city, take them out of this place. For we will destroy this place, because the outcry against them has grown so great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it." So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law who had married his daughters, and said, "Get up out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city." But to his sons-in-law he seemed to be joking. When the morning dawned, the angels urged Lot to hurry, saying, "Arise, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be consumed in the punishment of the city." And while he lingered, the men took hold of his hand, his wife's hand, and the hands of his 2 daughters, the Lord being merciful to him. And they brought him out and set him outside the city. So it came to pass, when they had brought them outside, that he said, "Escape for your life. Do not look behind you, nor stay anywhere in the plain. Escape to the mountains, lest you be destroyed." Then Lot said to them, "Please, no, my lords. Indeed now your servant has found favor in your sight, and you have increased your mercy, which you have shown me by saving my life. But I cannot escape to the mountains, lest some evil overtake me and I die. See now, this city near enough to flee to, and it is a little one. Please let me escape there, and my soul shall live. See, I have favored you concerning this thing also, and that I will not overthrow this city for which you have spoken." Hurry, escape there, for I cannot do anything until you arrive there." Therefore the name of the city was called Zoar. The sun had risen upon the earth when Lot entered Zoar. Then the Lord rained brimstone and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. So he overthroweth those cities, all the plains, all the inhabitants of the cities, and what grew on the ground. But his wife looked back behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. And Abraham went early in the morning to the place where he had stood before the Lord. Then he looked toward Sodom and Gomorrah, and toward the land of the plain, and he saw, and behold, the smoke of the land which went up like the smoke of a furnace. And it came to pass, when God destroyed the cities of the plain, that God remembered Abraham, and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow, and he overthrew the cities in which Lot had dwelt. Look around you. Is this world not just like Jesus said? You may think, well, almost. We're still missing those roaming homosexual rape gangs. Maybe. It might be that after the rapture, this last piece of the picture will come about. But I would say, take a look at all the pride parades going on around the world. Take a look at what's going on in all aspects of society. I think at a minimum, while it will still increase in severity, things like the rape gangs are happening and being hidden from view by governments and media that refuse to say anything bad about homosexuals, much less let you know about any crimes related to it. Think about it. What you see right now is horrific, and that's what they're willing to show you. So why did Jesus tell us this? Well, I think there's 3 reasons. 1, the obvious reason is to prepare us. To be forewarned is to be forearmed. 2, which is also obvious, is a warning to a lost world. He's telling them, I told you this would happen, and I'm also telling you what's coming next, so cut it out and get saved while you can. And lastly is a 2-part warning to those who profess the name of Jesus. First is a warning in a picture of the Laodicea church, and here is where we go back to what I said a few minutes ago that we would go back to. So Lot left with his men and went to Sodom. Abraham left with his men and went the other way. So my question is, where was Lot's men and their families? And that takes us back to the conversation. You see, when Abraham was bartering with the Lord, he could have just said, please spare Lot and his family. But Abraham was also concerned about all the people that left with Lot. Furthermore, the last number that Lot got the Lord to agree to wasn't 1 or 4, which were how many that was in Lot's family, but rather it was 10. Abraham was bartering because he was concerned also about the people that left with Lot. So where were they? When the angels told Lot, it's time to go, is there anyone else? Lot said the only others were his 2 son-in-laws, who were not with him at the time, so the angels said, go get them. Of course, they didn't listen to Lot, so they died as well. The only ones that survived were Lot, his wife, and 2 daughters. So what happened to everyone else? There was an incident where the king of Shinar attacked Sodom and Gomorrah, but the Bible is clear that Lot and his possessions that he had with him at the time were what was taken. His wife and daughters were not taken. I would guess that some of the people that left with Lot were also killed in this, but by no means were all of them killed, or that would have been noted. So again, why were none of them rescued? It would have been because they had fully become Sodomites themselves and were no different than the people of the city. Just like the church of Laodicea today is no different than the lost world that it's in. The second warning is to those of us right now who do love Jesus and are not a part of the Laodicean church. The other group, which was the group that was rescued, was Lot and his family. But as we saw, when it was time to go, they hesitated, to the point that the angels grabbed them by the arms and said, let's go. Why is that? That place was awful. It was an abomination. Why wouldn't they have been raring to go? And then when they got out of the city, Lot asked if they could go to the next town instead of the mountains, and the angel said okay. Why did Lot's wife look back and get turned into a pillar of salt? Well, as I read it, it wasn't because God was putting the whammy down and she just felt like she had to see those fireworks. No, they hesitated and she looked back because they were feeling a sense of loss. That tells me that, 1, during their time of living there, they obviously knew how to avoid those rape gangs. They knew when it was safe to go out and when they needed to stay inside. They knew where to go in the city and where not to go in the city, or else I don't think they would have been too happy with that place and they would have been looking to get out. We also get another clue. When the men broke through the door, they said to Lot, "You came to us as an alien and now you're acting like a judge," which is inferring that they accepted him into their city, or at least at a minimum allowed him to live there in peace. That also tells me that while they were there, they were not taking a part in the abominable acts or else they wouldn't have been saved. But they also weren't speaking out against them. They kept their head down and went along to get along. And they became comfortable in their life there, desensitized and tolerant to the point that they had a fondness for their life there. And that also brings to mind the warnings that Jesus gives us about not loving this world and the things that are in it. And one last thing to take note of. 4 people were rescued from the judgment, but only 3 made it to safety. Is there anywhere else in the Bible we are seeing something like that? Possibly any parables that have the same idea? I'll leave that to your own investigation of God's Word.